Today we're going to be working on an oil painting, and these are the materials you're going to need: some linseed oil, a paint palette, some palette knives, and some paint thinner. I use this brand and it's the odorless one. For brushes, you're going to need two kind, hard and soft brushes, and that's referring to the bristles. I use synthetic hair brushes. I don't use anything too fancy. We're going to start by working on the underpainting, and for that you're going to need raw umber oil paint and some paint thinner. So here we're going to be prepping our paint. This is the consistency you want. Even something more watered down would work good, and we're only using paint thinner at this point. After covering the whole canvas, I always like to go on with a rag just to smooth out the surface and get rid of all those brush strokes. Now it's time for sketching. We're going to grab one of our hard bristle brushes, some paint thinner, and that same raw umber paint. For this painting, I'm going to be rendering some flowers inside of a mug. You can use whatever items you would like, whatever you find easier or funner to paint. You can use plants, flowers, vases, bottles. Just remember that when you start sketching, we're going really broad here, really loose. It's like a picture out of focus that you're slowly going to bring into focus and start adding more detail. This is our very first layer, our very first sketch, so you can go with big, broad shapes that, they're going to show you what you're seeing without giving extra detail. Now for the paint, these are the colors I'm going to be using. I'll put them up on the screen, but it's going to be cerulean blue, violet, cadmium yellow, lemon yellow, as well as titanium white, and the same raw umber that we use for this sketch. Here I started by painting our object, the mug, but then I realized, I don't think I'm getting the right values here, so I decided to start adding in a background. It's always a good idea to add in your background early so you can see that you're getting the right values in there. When it comes to color, it's a lot about value. Value is very important because you can have a lot of color in your piece but not a lot of ranging values, and that's when your piece will fall flat. Here I'm going to be adding in a highlight to our shadow, which I know sounds weird, but that is our reflected light. This is what gives objects a more rounded look, and something that's very important about this highlight is that it can never be as bright as our actual highlight. And here I'm just continuing to add our background as I'm working on both the objects and the background at the same time, bouncing around so that I can play with those values and see how they correlate to each other. Something that I didn't mention earlier in the video is that for our mixing medium at this point, we're going to be using the paint thinner again, but we're adding the refined linseed oil. And because this is our first color layer, we're going to be using more paint thinner than linseed oil in our mixture. And as you go and you build up more layers, you're going to start adding more oil and less thinner. Here I started adding the highlights already, like our brightest highlights, which you would usually do this at the very end of your painting, but it's my favorite part and I'm very impatient, I feel, so I always end up doing it pretty early. Here I'm gonna get started working on the flowers. We're gonna work on the stems first, so I'm mixing our green color. For this I'm gonna be using the lemon yellow and the cerulean blue. Ideally I would use phthalo blue instead of cerulean, but it's all I have at the moment, so it still works. It works out fine. It's just giving me a little bit of a cooler green than I wanted, so I end up adding some red in there. And again, we're just blocking in all of those shapes with color. Remember to go broad, don't go too much detail just yet. We're just adding in all of the shapes first, especially for the flowers. I think you can get really caught up with all of the beautiful petals. You know, even myself, I want to add all of that detail very early in, and then you end up losing the structure of the flowers. And just like with the foreground, I'm also adding in the background as I go. As I paint some petals, I add in the background, not only to shape the petals into what I want them to look like, but also to play with those values. And we're all done. I'm only doing one layer on this still life. It's a really good way to practice your values, your proportions, your color, as well as getting you warmed up. I hope everybody learned something new today and you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much.